everyone, and welcome to the working group members who have joined us this evening, as well as the members of the public, to our third Mid-City Communities Plan Update Working Group meeting. I'm Shannon Kaur. I'm a senior planner in the City Planning Department, and will be helping facilitate this working group meeting tonight. This meeting is being recorded, and that is to support anyone who could not join tonight or would like to follow along after tonight. It will be posted on the Plan Update website following the meeting. For those that missed the September meeting or any of our previous meetings, the recordings and meeting summaries are available on the Plan Update website for your convenience. Next slide. And here is our agenda for the evening. We will start with an introduction, and then city staff will be presenting in two parts. The first part will be focused on the draft existing conditions mobility assessment. After that, we will pause for 20 minutes for a chance for the working group members to reflect, share their thoughts, and ask any questions. The second part will be focused on historic preservation. And then again, following that with a pause for 20 minutes for working group discussion. We'll then take public comment for 20 minutes at the end of the meeting, and then we will conclude this meeting at 8 p.m. Next slide. To begin with an introduction, next slide. We do have our working group members here tonight who are all residents of Mid-City, representing different areas in Mid-City. They were all brought on through an application process. For those who are curious about the application process, it is available online. This slide here has their role as working group members. We have asked them to be involved in the plan update from start to finish. We are aiming for an additional 2 more years in this process. We've asked them to review project materials related to public engagement, research, and technical studies. We've asked them to suggest ideas that could be included in the plan update, to also provide feedback on proposals related to the plan update. And I'll also add a request for all of us who are in this meeting tonight, which is to listen to each other and to the public, because we're seeking to create a dynamic update for a very diverse community, and we are wanting to be collective about our approach and hear each other's point of view. Given we are all on Zoom this evening, I would like to request our working group members have their cameras on so we can see your faces. And please also rename yourself in Zoom to include your name and the community you are from, so that when it comes time for the working group discussion, we can see the community you represent. For the members of the public, please also rename yourself with your name so we can see who is in attendance. You can rename yourself by clicking participants on the bottom of your Zoom screen, hover your mouse over your name, and then click the 3 dots button and choose rename, and a pop-up box will appear. Next slide. And here are some logistics for the meeting. Another reminder, this meeting is being recorded. You can also use the chat function to share written questions or comments throughout the meeting. We have staff that will try their best to answer as many questions in the chat as they can. However, if we do not have time to answer all of them, we will include responses within our meeting summary following the meeting. For our working group members, during the discussion portion, please use the raise hand function so that I know you would like to speak and I'll call on you. And then for members of the public, during the public comment period at the end, please also use the raise hand function, and I will grant you access to unmute yourself. And just so you know, in the webinar format, you'll not be able to turn on your camera. Next slide. Yep. And I want to invite you all to look at the way we hold space together today in our online webinar world. Here is a list of meeting agreements. We want to interact respectfully with project staff, working group members, and members of the community. We want to stay concise to create time for as many voices in the room to contribute. We want to consider the diverse needs and goals of the Mid-City communities and to work to provide inclusive input and resources. And we want to share relevant on-topic perspectives and information. We want to help maintain a welcoming and inclusive environment that values all perspectives. In order to stick to our meeting agreement of staying concise and creating time for as many voices to contribute, there may be a topic that comes up where we're maybe back and forth on a topic or feeling stuck on a topic, or maybe there's a question that we don't have an answer to in the moment. What I'll do in those moments is to ask that we table that topic and either revisit it and come back to it at the end of the meeting, or maybe it's something our team can follow up about after the meeting and address through our meeting summary notes. So I'll be on the lookout for moments like this to keep us on track and moving forward. And I'll now pass it over to Alex to continue the introduction to the meeting.
Thanks, Shannon. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Frost. I am the project manager for the Mid-City Communities Plan Update. Mid-City is a large area made up of 4 community planning areas: Eastern areas, City Heights, Kensington Talmadge, and Normal Heights. Mid-City consists of over 8,000 acres. There's over 133,000 people living in Mid-City, which is about 10% of the city's population as of 2022. And over 20,000 jobs. There are 24 neighborhoods within the Mid-City area. Next. We are updating a Mid-City Communities Plan because the last plan was adopted in 1998, which is over 25 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. The update to the plan will serve as a 30-year vision for land use, mobility, urban design, public facilities and services, natural resources, historic and cultural resources, and economic development. The 4 goals for the plan updates are to address regional growth and housing needs, understand community needs and enhance quality of life, evaluate infrastructure demand, and reduce environmental impact. Next. During the phase 1 of the plan update, we hosted or attended 83 community activities and events, provided 2 online surveys, and gathered more than 5,500 comments from over 25,000 people. We are now moving on to phase 2, where we'll be developing preliminary concepts based on community ideas and technical analysis. Next. We have several new documents on our project website. The last working group meeting on September 11th, we have a meeting summary, which includes detailed answers to questions from the last meeting, a draft existing conditions, mobility assessment, and appendices, which will be part of today's presentation, and also a draft response to community feedback related to the revision to the Mid-City Atlas existing conditions report. We also have several upcoming reports and Planning Commission workshop. The draft historic context statement is scheduled to be released on Friday. Draft engagement summary by late December. And there is a Mid-City Communities Plan Update Planning Commission workshop scheduled for January 9th. And the final draft Mid-City Atlas existing conditions report we're anticipating early February. Also, a new announcement, Angelica Rocha from the Eastern area has moved to San Francisco, so she is no longer available to serve in the working group. However, Paul Smith, who's also representing Eastern area, has agreed to fill her spot. We wanted to ease Paul into the working group, so he'll officially introduce himself at the next meeting when we meet back in person. Next. Now moving on to today's presenters, we have Emmanuel and Phil from Sustainability and Mobility Department, and Bernie and Kelsey from City Planning Department's Heritage Preservation section. We also have Selena Sanchez and Aparna Padma Kumar working behind the scenes tonight. And I will now pass it on to Emmanuel for the presentation on existing conditions mobility assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening. My name is Emmanuel Fora. I'm an associate traffic engineer with the City Sustainability and Mobility Department. And with me today is Phil Traum, my program manager. Next slide. Today, I will give an overview of the draft Mid-City Existing Conditions Mobility Assessment. To get started, I will talk about how we approach mobility planning for the city. The framework for mobility goals and policies are found in the city's general plan that was recently updated in 2024. This included more emphasis on alternative modes of transportation and promoting equity. The city's climate action plan set the goals for mode share and vehicle miles traveled to reach our environmental targets, while the mobility master plan is intended to guide the implementation of mobility improvements throughout the city. Additionally, we incorporate relevant council policies into the efforts, such as the city's complete streets policy. Overall, our goal for the mobility network is to encourage and promote alternative modes of travel, making them a viable alternative to driving. At the same time, we try to balance the needs on the roadway network in hopes of making it more efficient, accessible, and usable for emergency responders. Next slide, please. So what is the existing conditions mobility assessment and what purpose does it serve? Essentially, it describes the current state of the mobility network of the study area. In this case, it's for the mid-city communities. It's developed through a variety of quantitative and qualitative analyses. This includes collecting data from traffic counts and collision histories and scoring the network based on its current conditions and geometrics. Through this analysis, we get a better understanding of the opportunities and constraints for the mobility network, such as where a right-of-way is constrained or there are gaps in the network. Ultimately, the assessment concludes with mobility needs for each travel mode. With a common understanding of the mobility needs for the area, we can work collaboratively in developing the mobility network that will be included in the Mid-City Community Plan update. A high-level look at the timeline for the mobility portion of the CPU. We began with data collection and analysis, culminating in this mobility existing conditions assessment. This will serve as a starting point for the network development, which will eventually go into the mobility element of the community plan. We will produce a mobility technical report, which describes how the proposed mobility network will operate under the proposed CPU conditions. Environmental analysis required by the California Environment Quality Act will likely take place at or near the same time, and a VMT impact analysis report will be created to disclose if there are any VMT impacts. Next slide, please. When performing the assessment, we look at 4 major categories for each travel mode. Demand evaluates the existing usage of the network and is informed by traffic counts. Priority identifies the areas within the communities most conducive to travel by a specific mode. For this, the city has developed models, including the pedestrian priority model and the bicycle demand model, which were both utilized for this analysis. Quality is described by the current conditions of the network and how comfortable it is to travel by a specific mode. For example, narrow damaged sidewalk would score low in pedestrian quality. Connectivity attempts to describe how easy it is to get around by mode and to understand where the gaps are in the network. Last but not least, collision histories are studied to understand the safety needs for mobility within the community. The study area was determined, The study area was determined by selecting key roadways and intersections that facilitate multimodal access and movement to and within mid-city, while also considering where planned or potential growth is anticipated. This ensured capture of all major corridors, freeway access points, and includes 88 study intersections. The study area is further supplemented by the ongoing analyses and development of the adjacent college area community plan. Primarily, this is El Cajon Boulevard, east of 54th Street. And finally, the city's climate action plan promoted a mobility loading prioritization for our streets, starting with pedestrians. Next slide, please. The previously described methodology was applied to each mode individually. Although the data collected and analysis do overlap between them, starting with Chapter 2, the current state of pedestrian mobility was analyzed. This analysis is summarized in the pedestrian needs map, which is figure 6.1 of the report. I will discuss this map in more detail in a subsequent slide, but I wanted to highlight the data collection and transportation analyses that went into the creation of the pedestrian needs map. As shown on the left are the inputs for the pedestrian analysis. This included data in the form of pedestrian counts taken at intersections during peak periods and a 5-year history of pedestrian-involved collisions within the study area. Missing sidewalks were identified using the available data, including a sidewalk inventory, aerial imagery, and field checks. The pedestrian priority model identified areas of mid-city where pedestrian activity is high or likely to be high. Finally, the city's pedestrian environment quality evaluation, or PEQI, evaluates the current pedestrian network to describe the expected experience of walking that network. It considers all the existing characteristics of the walking environment. For segments and mid-block location, it includes items like the width of the sidewalk, presence of shade trees, and availability of a buffer from moving traffic. At the intersection level, it includes items such as presence of ADA compliant curb ramps, marked crosswalks, and pedestrian countdown timers. The scores fall into one of three categories: low, medium, high. For example, a narrow sidewalk that's adjacent to the curb with no shade trees would score low on the PEQI index. Next slide, please. As an example of the inputs that go into the pedestrian needs map, missing sidewalks were identified throughout the community using the city's missing sidewalk inventory, then validated using the latest in aerial imagery and field checks. Missing sidewalks along the west side of Fairmount Avenue and in both directions along Aldine Drive limit connections between Mid-City and Mission Valley. The biggest concentration of missing sidewalks is in the eastern area community, including segments of 54th Street, Chollas Parkway, College Avenue, College Grove Drive, and many residential streets around the area. Missing sidewalks is one input of the overall pedestrian needs map. Details, including figures and tables for this and the other pedestrian analyses, can be found in Chapter 2 of the report. Next slide, please. The pedestrian analysis is summarized into the pedestrian needs map shown here. Key findings from all the pedestrian analysis are shown on this map. The legend includes locations of 3 or more pedestrian-involved collisions, missing sidewalks, areas identified in the pedestrian priority model, rapid stations, and segments of low PEQI scores. In Mid-City, the highest pedestrian priority areas include in the central part of the study area that's within City Heights between El Cajon Boulevard and University Avenue, plus a small concentration along Adams Avenue in the northwestern area. This is a result of a high number of attractors from commercial uses and major transit stops, despite the detractor effects of higher traffic volumes in that same area. The model findings were supported by count data indicating that El Cajon Boulevard and University Avenue as the corridors with the highest existing pedestrian activity. Next slide, please. Chapter 3 of the report is dedicated to understanding the underlying bicycle needs for Mid-City. For this slide, I want to highlight the data and analysis that went into creating the bicycle needs map. Like the pedestrian analysis, traffic counts and collision histories were collected for cycling. Additionally, the existing bike facilities within the study area were inventoried. Similar to the pedestrian priority model, we use the city's bicycle demand model to identify where biking activity is likely to occur. Bicycle connectivity was evaluated to understand the potential travel shed for bicyclists. And bicycle level of traffic stress, or LTS, is the proxy for quality and evaluates the network for how comfortable it feels to ride on a bike. Scores range from 1 to 4, where 1 is the least traffic stress on the rider, and 4 being the highest stress on the rider. Next slide, please. Similarly to the pedestrian needs, the central area of Mid-City has higher bicycle demand due to the concentration of commercial businesses and other destinations. This area primarily extends along El Cajon Boulevard, University Avenue, with a small portion along Fairmount Avenue and Adams Avenue. Most of the major corridors within Mid-City are LTS 3 or LTS 4 in their entirety throughout the community, meaning that the facilities do not feel comfortable for most casual riders. It's worth mentioning both the city and Sandag proposed projects in the area that will provide new bike facilities or upgrade existing ones. These include, but are not limited to projects proposed on El Cajon Boulevard, University Avenue, and Fairmount Avenue. Next slide, please. Additionally, the city is also updating its over a decade-old bicycle master plan. As part of that effort's existing conditions analysis, it requested public feedback on bicycling throughout the city. There are many comments made in Mid-City, which this effort will be incorporating. Next slide, please. For the transit need maps, some of the data inputs overlapped with the other modes. For Mid-City, public transit shares the infrastructure with general traffic. Traffic counts were collected at both the roadway segment and intersection levels. Collision history consisted of pedestrian and cyclist-involved collisions near transit stops. And finally, we also received data from MTS to provide data on transit ridership and on-time performance. Next slide, please. 2023 ridership data was provided by MTS. In the report, the data is provided in map form shown here and in table form by stop. This and other analysis is detailed in chapter 4 of the report. I will note that we recently received a comment that highlighted potential discrepancies in the data, which we are currently reviewing, and will update the report based on the results of the review. Next slide, please. Mid-City is served by 14 MTS bus routes, including 2 rapid bus routes. Most of the western side of the area is within a quarter-mile walking distance of a bus stop. Destinations and places reached by the Mid-City serving bus routes include Mission Valley, downtown San Diego, SDSU, UTC, and adjacent cities. No trolley lines currently serve Mid-City directly. However, the planned Purple Line is anticipated to have at least 1 station in Mid-City, which may drive additional transit activity and first and last mile trips. Transit within Mid-City operates along the same roadway segments as passenger vehicles and is therefore influenced by the same congestion. This congestion influences areas with some of the highest transit passenger activity, including stops at Fairmount Avenue and University Avenue. On-time performance is an important factor. On-time performance is an important factor for transit users that depend on service to get to their destination. Average on-time performance ranged from 75% to 88% among the 14 bus routes in Mid-City. Only one route, the Rapid 235, met the MTS's 85% target with an 88% on-time performance. Most transit users access transit stop by walking or bicycling. Frequent occurrence of pedestrian and bicycle collisions near a transit stop may indicate potential safety risk for transit users. The stops with the most pedestrian and bicycling collisions near a transit stop occurred at Fairmount and University Avenue, and then the second stop was at Fairmount and El Cajon Boulevard. Mid-City has a public transportation commute mode share of 4.7%, which is higher than the citywide mode share and more than double the regional transit mode share for 2022 based on census data. Next slide, please. The data collected and analyzed for the vehicle needs map includes intersection and roadway counts, collision history for the most recent 5 years of data available, and performing travel time and speed surveys. Travel speed ratio is the actual travel speed compared to the posted speed limit, which serves as a proxy for congestion. Chapter 5 of the report details the vehicular analysis that informs the vehicular needs map. Next slide, please. The vehicular needs map illustrates the intersections and segments that operate at substandard level of service, segments with low average speed to posted speed, and areas with high concentrations of vehicular collisions. The needs are largely concentrated on the roadways providing connections to adjacent communities and the freeway system, including Adams Avenue, El Cajon Boulevard, University Avenue, Fairmount Avenue, and Euclid Avenue. These roadways interface with the higher residential density areas, as well as locations with commercial uses. There is significant overlap between the vehicular need areas and the needs of the other travel modes. Providing for the safety, efficiency, and comfort of each travel mode is critical to supporting a balanced transportation system. A holistic approach to network development will be required to ensure improvements to one mode do not significantly decrease the safety or viability of other modes. Next slide, please. So at a high level, I've gone through what can be expected when reviewing the draft existing conditions mobility assessment for Mid-City. I'd like to reiterate that the intent of the report is to use data and transportation analysis to understand the underlying needs for all the mobility modes, with the goal that it is reflective of the lived experience in Mid-City. This is to gain a common base for which we can build upon as we develop the mobility network and improvements proposed for this community plan update. To that end, the draft is currently available at the project website, and we are requesting comments by the end of February in order to finalize the report in spring of 2025. This concludes my presentation, and I thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Manuel. So now we'll hear from working group members. For those members of the public who do have comments and questions, please hold on to those. We will get to the public comment period at the end of the meeting. For now, we'll take about 2 minutes per working group member for as many working group members as we can get to within this 20-minute block. We may not get to you this round, but we definitely will get to you next round and start with you if you didn't have a chance to share this round. Please consider the questions at the top of this slide as a prompt. Do you have any clarifications you would like made or questions? Did anything stand out to you? And is there any mobility needs not showcased or explored in this analysis? For all in attendance, both working group members and the public, you can also provide comments through the chat if you see any issues with the accuracy of the information provided on our slides, or if you have any detailed comments about something in specific. The chat will be part of the record of this meeting, and we will refer to it to make any adjustments as needed. So, to turn it over to our working group members, does anyone have anything they would like to say? Please use the raise hand function, and I'll call on you when I see your hands raised. We will begin with Eric.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for presenting that, Emmanuel. I appreciate it. I've lived in El Cerrito since January of 2017. Just to introduce myself, and I've commuted to North County for that entire time. So I know a little about getting in and out of the neighborhood. I think you nailed it when you said that the biggest pain points for traffic when using the when driving a car is getting in and out of the neighborhood. I use Colwood right to Montezuma to get onto the 15, and it's painful in the morning going and painful coming back because there's a choke point where it goes down to one lane, and it just backs up from there. I think we all saw kind of the risks of what can happen with such choke points on Halloween night this year when there was a big wildfire that shut that road down. And I'm going to be honest, the only reason I was able to get home to trick or treat in the El Cerrito little parade with my kids is I left over an hour earlier from work because I heard about the fire, and then I drove in the bus lane on El Cajon because I really wanted to trick or treat with my kids. So I'm personally, when you look at that, only about 4% of commuters use mass transit, and in the existing conditions it was clear 80% of people drive, and I think it's more than that when you look at what you just shared with us. It's a little frustrating. You took a whole lane on El Cajon to give it to the buses, and you're making people like me get home a lot later to our kids, right, every day, and we're spending less money after work in the economy of Mid-City because we just don't have time. We can't go to happy hours. We can't go to dinner. We're stuck in our cars, right? Which emits, greenhouse gases. Because if you're making us idle in our cars because you're prioritizing buses, I think you're actually hurting the planet more than you're helping there. So that's my take. I think we need to work on getting people in and out of our neighborhood a lot better. That should be a key point. I think all of these things, you can't just say you're going to balance them all. You have to weight them appropriately. If 90% of people are driving, then 90% of the funds need to go to the cars, because we got to get around the neighborhood. And in a natural disaster, we got to get out of the neighborhood. So, and a lot of our roads are in terrible condition. And I can't help but notice that the city puts a lot more resources into the tourist neighborhoods near the coast and the neighborhoods to the north. And I think when you look at who lives in each of these neighborhoods, it's a major equity issue. So I also noticed that when
Thank you,
when there's a
Eric.
water group project, our neighborhood just gets a trench cap, and other neighborhoods get gutter to gutter resurfacing. So I'd like to know why that is. All right, that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the working group have thoughts to share? Right, David Modi?
I'd like to let Lynn go first, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
yeah, no problem. Lynn?
Sure, thanks, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to comment because I commented at the existing conditions report that the eastern area is the least walkable of the 4 communities in the mid-city. And then you see this map and you see the complete lack of sidewalks close to transit corridors. That makes it, I think for me, really clear why I don't see enough transit being used in the eastern area, and there just simply aren't enough sidewalks to get to the transit like University. By the way, on figure 2-21, it's missing sidewalk from Streamview and Billman to University, and that's not reflected on the map. And that has actually been an infrastructure request from the eastern area since 2010. It's right now about 20% done. That's all I had to say. Thanks. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Lynn. On to you, David.
I'd like to share my screen. Can I do that?
Sure, if you can stay within your 2 minutes.
I can.
Okay.
Let me,
If you have the ability.
I do. I just have to make sure that I am now focused on the thing that I wanted to share. So there is a discussion of congestion and level F service on roads, and I know that's not the priority in the city anymore, but I wanted to share with people what level F service looks like. This is the intersection of Euclid and Monroe, taken in the morning. The cars are actually flowing at 3 times speed, so the real speed would probably be something like, well, that's a little too slow. It would probably be this. This is the only way out of Talmadge. We used to be able to also exit in the morning over at Colwood and Monroe, but when the road was narrowed to 1 lane, the morning backup now is back beyond the Monroe intersection, so only 2 or 3 cars can exit the neighborhood using that route. I just wanted people to, and this you have to realize is not El Cajon Boulevard, this is not University Avenue, this is not Fairmont. This is in a single family neighborhood. It's just a neighborhood street and it's this congested. So that's what I wanted to share on the way of a visual. I second the need for a shade tree. I put it in the comment, shade trees at bus stops. I can get, and it's not just plant a tree, but you have to plant it where the sun is, you know, where it shades from the sun. Going back to Aldine, Aldine is probably is a non-arterial road with a substandard design and heavy use that traffic engineer Gary Pence actually said was probably the worst in the city. And the condition of that road, the design of that road is, was why there are no sidewalks there, why there is no bike route there, is simply not wide enough to allow for these other uses to be in that roadway. All right, thank you.
Thank you, David. Thomas?
Hi, yes, Thomas from Normal Heights. I had noticed, and I just wanted to ask a question about connectivity, both for bike and pedestrian use between the Normal Heights, Kensington area and the Mission Valley. I noticed that the I-5 bike multi-purpose path was not identified on any of the maps, either for pedestrian or bike. And while it's not a hugely helpful connection because it's sort of bookended by the 8, it is in fact a connection, and it didn't seem to be included in the analysis performed or noted in the maps. And I didn't know if that was because it's a Caltrans facility or if that's just an oversight.
Emmanuel or Phil, would you like to respond to that? Or maybe it's something we just make note of and follow up at another time?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. And I'll let Emmanuel jump in too. I'm just scanning the maps to double check. But yeah, thanks for noticing that. We need to include the both regional and our city and local facilities as well. So thanks for catching that. And Emmanuel, any thoughts on that, or did we notice that as well?
Oh, no, I think you covered most of it, Phil. Thank you. Those are the kind of comments that we're looking at, looking to receive, to make sure that this report is as accurate as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. All right, anyone else from our working group? Yes, Madeline.
I have to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the presentation. Just one thing, I think, and that was a really good catch, Thomas, on your part for the community of Norwell Heights. I was just curious as far as, seniors go and mobility challenges that the senior community faces. If there are any city plans for volunteer, driving services, that sort of thing for the community, and if the city's ever looked at anything like that, because it's just very challenging, especially with seniors not able to drive, and then the mobility challenges of the transportation system. And then the second thing is along Adams Avenue between the 805 and the 15, cars just tend to, I think there's a need for some traffic calming, a great need for traffic calming along there. Folks are coming off the freeways and driving very fast between that portion along Adams Avenue. And those are my only two comments. Thank you.
All right. Phil or Emmanuel, did you want to respond at all about any city programs to support seniors and volunteer driving services? If not, we can also take that as good feedback to consider.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. That's great feedback. And maybe just to share a little bit for Madeline, and I'll hit maybe the first Adams Avenue. So we'll add that and take a look for traffic calming. And in parallel, we're working on some slow streets initiatives that we had funding for, although that's sort of staggered separately, but that will be a resource toolkit to look specifically at those kind of traffic calming treatments, or traffic calming 2.0. So more to come there, but I think we can look at that as far as network development, as we pivot from the existing conditions to that, and then the ultimate plan. Senior service is interesting, right? So the city, just to be really clear, we look at making all of our facilities ADA accessible, and that's more on our infrastructure side. We have started working on programs both for multimodal ridership and more complete streets, and started talking more about individual services like that. But I think primarily that type of service is coming through FACT, the full access to coordinated transportation. That's the CTSA for the region, and providing senior services and matching rides, and they have a brokership model, and that's through Sandag. And then also Sandag has a variety of senior services too. So there's a lot of coordination across city to the region and to other providers like that. And then I would say that the third branch is that we work with our community-based organizations. So specific demographic needs and that kind of thing come up frequently, and we talk about our facilities being for all ages and abilities. So on its face, there isn't a senior program but I think in the future, as we expand programs holistically and look at things like Fred, the shuttles downtown, and we had a demonstration one in Pacific Beach. that we can do more of that. And in fact, we're trying to get more vendors on that list, and there'll be an RFP coming out in a couple weeks for that. So hopefully that's just, it's the array that we're trying for solutions there, but no specific, current senior shuttle program right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, I do see your hand up. I want to give a chance to any of the other working group members to maybe do their first round of comments, if anyone has any, and then we can come back to you. Any other working group members? Lisa?
Hey, hi, I want to give my time to Eric. So I just wanted to give my time to Eric. Eric, you can have my 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm fine with traffic calming. I don't mind driving a little slower once I'm in the neighborhood for everyone's safety. It's really these choke points getting in and out. So, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that the city can put significant resources. I mean, even if you had to put a retaining wall where Montezuma joins Fairmont and get 2 lanes to merge onto there, that would do wonders instead of 1 lane. Yeah, that's kind of a expensive project, but think about the public safety to be able to get in and out. I want to note that there was an active shooter situation at SDSU. It was a crime, not like a school shooter, but someone right in front of the university shot someone. At the same time, there was that fire. There could be a situation where you need to get SDSU students out. You need to get our neighborhood out. I think public safety, and then just, again, quality of life. So many of us commute. Think about the hours we're away from our families and sitting in cars, which, again, global warming. So I think significant investment, even if you've got to do some major, retaining walls to add the lanes just at the choke points in and out, because that's where the choke points are, I think would do wonders. And then, yeah, by all means, traffic calm the neighborhood, right? But get us in and out as efficiently as possible. And then the other thing I want to say is, and then again, yeah, the money should be used for the maximum good, which is the 80+% of us who drive. And then just think, as far as equity, a lot of people can't take public transit. Think about the people in the military. We're very, so I have so many neighbors who are, serving their country, and it's not the best way for them to get to their base at all the hours they got to be there. By taking public transit. Think about people like me who have 3 kids. I'm not going to take them on public transit. I got to drive them in the minivan. Think about people who have work trucks. There's a lot of blue collar people in our neighborhood, and they can't take public transit. They got to drive, their van or their truck full of their tools to go keep our society functioning. Let's raise their quality of life, get them home to their families quicker, give them more time with their families in the morning. And don't focus so much on, frankly, upper class people who are riding their bikes for fun. Let's just call it what it is. It's I know there's people who commute on bike, but you got to look at the numbers. You got to weight your investment accordingly. And that's all I got to say. All right. And I know I'm talking about future conditions, but sometimes the way these existing condition things are phrased and the spin that's put on them is geared towards a certain agenda, and I just want to push back against that agenda. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Randy, I see your hand is raised. On to you.
Thank you, and thanks to the staff for the report. I appreciate the work you did, and it was powerful to see that the transit ridership in Mid-City was twice as high as the city average. I know that some of the highest performing bus lines are in City Heights and Mid-City, in particular, like the 7, the 215, and the 13 continue to be the highest performing transit lines in the entire network, specifically bus lines as well. I like to see some more analysis that compares the mid-city conditions to citywide conditions. I saw the map with all the crashes, but to put that in perspective of the entire city, I think is powerful. City Heights is home, and Mid-City but particularly City Heights is home to three of the most dangerous streets in the entire city of San Diego. 3 Vision Zero corridors, Elko and Boulevard, University Avenue, and Euclid. The analysis, it was a little hard to tell that was the case. It just looked like a lot of crashes were happening and you could see a concentration, but without the understanding the relation to the citywide averages, it's kind of muted a little bit. I know that there was a citywide analysis years ago that found that low-income communities experience 10 times more crashes than non-low-income communities in the city of San Diego. So I think I would like to see actually more analysis through the equity lens as it relates to traffic violence. I appreciate and want to see more bus-only lanes in City Heights. I think more people would ride transit if it was safer, easier to get to. I live near the 13 bus, and standing out on Poplar, Redwood, and Fairmount at night is a terrible thought, honestly, to do with like a toddler in particular. It's high-speed traffic. It's super dark. One mistake from a motorist could wipe out my entire family, and I'm tired of the disproportionate traffic violence in Mid-City, and I support all the efforts that we've had to promote traffic calming. I also went Halloween trick-or-treating with my kids, and I appreciate that we have some safe streets in Azalea Park. And I know the residents of Elko and Boulevard appreciate the benefits that came from the bus-only lanes there, and they also deserve the ability to walk around their neighborhoods to trick-or-treat safely. And the streets just aren't gutters to drive cars and move cars at the highest speed, highest volume possible. We're here to plan neighborhoods and communities as well, and we all deserve safe streets. And so I'd like to see a little bit more analysis that puts the conditions in the citywide perspective. Also want to point out that 54th Street, not that surprised to see that it was rated so negatively. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time. When I was at City Heights CDC, we raised a profile on that. In 2015, sadly, after years of advocacy, 15-year-old Jonathan Cortez was trying to get home from school. There was no sidewalks on either side of the street of 54th Street. And he was hit and killed while skating home. And tragically, his life ended and his family lost him forever. And we worked to get sidewalks installed after that, but it wasn't until that death took place that happened. And we shouldn't have to wait for more people to die. We know where the crashes are happening, and we need to invest in the traffic safety. So I'm going to be supporting that throughout this planning process, and I encourage others as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Well, that brings us at the end of this first working group discussion portion. Just a reminder to the members of the public, we do have a public comment period at the end of the meeting, so please hold on to your thoughts and your comments and we will get to you. I'll now pass it on to Bernie for the historic preservation presentation.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Hello, my name is Bernie Turgeon, Senior Planner with the Heritage Preservation Section. With me this evening is Kelsey Kaline, Associate Planner, and Kelly Stonko, Deputy Director. This presentation is intended to introduce the historic and cultural component of the Mid-City Communities Plan Update. By way of background, the general plan contains a historic preservation element to guide the preservation, protection, restoration, and rehabilitation of historical and cultural resources. Goals are identification and preservation of the city's important historical resources and integration of historic preservation planning into the larger planning process, such as updates to community plans. This slide summarizes the historic and cultural resource component of the community plan update intended to achieve the general plan's goals. Each community plan update includes a historic context statement describing the history of the built environment, the themes important to the development of the community, and the property types that may be eligible for designation, due to a significant association with those themes. Historic surveys may also be included in a community plan update based on needs and resources available. This community plan update includes a focused reconnaissance survey, which helps to identify potential historical resources that would need further detailed evaluation in the future. And it informs the policies of the community plan's future historic preservation element. The survey is focused on identifying areas of shared development history, such as potential historic districts. The survey also evaluates the potential historic significance of post-World War II tract housing for possible exemption from the 45-year review process, as was done recently with the University and Mira Mesa Community Plan updates, which I will touch upon later in the presentation. The analysis of the draft community plan under the California Environmental Quality Act will also look at the effects of the historic built environment, archaeological resources, and tribal cultural resources reflective of the history of the local Kumeyaay. There will also be a cultural resource sensitivity report for the environmental analysis. The current slide identifies resources previously identified. The mid-city communities have a long-standing development history, and various surveys and individual property nominations have identified potential and significant historical resources. These include the 1996 Greater Mid-City Historic Preservation Survey. If you would go back to the previous slide, please. Thank you. The survey was a large reconnaissance survey that covered a portion of the mid-city communities, as well as North Park, Golden Hill, and part of Uptown. That survey inventoried properties and identified several areas as having the potential for nomination as a historic district based on future intensive surveys. 3 potential historic districts were identified, shown on the map here. The dark line, please go back to the previous slide. The survey boundary is shown in the dark line. There's a gray line approximately the 805 freeway. So this shows a portion of the mid-city area. The 3 communities, districts that were identified, one in the historic Kensington subdivisions, another within a portion of the Talmadge neighborhood, and a district boundary centered around the Cartieri building on Adams Avenue in Normal Heights. Areas also shown or partial in the photo. However, the survey's geographic scope bisected the historic Talmadge subdivisions at Aldine Drive, and a caveat was added to that survey that the entirety of the Talmadge Park Units 1, 2, and 3 and Talmadge Park Estates should be part of a future comprehensive survey. Recently, the listing of the Talmadge Park Estates Historic District on the National Register of Historic Places provides this missing piece and is also in the queue for processing for local designation. Next slide, please. Individually designated historic sites and historic districts in Mid-City are shown on this slide. The historic designated sites are shown with dots. Locally designated historical districts include the Talmadge Gates Historic District, outlined in teal here, and the Island Air Historical District in City Heights, outlined in blue. And while not a designated historical resource, yet important to this effort, Little Saigon is a Vietnamese cultural district proclaimed by City Council resolution and is centered around several blocks on El Cajon Boulevard at Menlo Avenue. Next slide, please. Images of designated historical resources are shown on this slide, clockwise from top left, the Gustav Anderson House on Biona Drive in Kensington Talmadge, the Rock House on Adams Avenue in Normal Heights, the Wilkinson Block on Adams in Normal Heights, several homes in the Island Air Historic District in City Heights, the Silverado Ballroom on University Heights and City Heights, a historic gate as a contributing element to the Talmadge Gates Historic District in Kensington Talmadge. Next slide, please. The objectives of the historic context statement are listed on this slide. The historic context statement presents an overview of the history of the plan area with specific emphasis on describing the significant historic themes and patterns that have contributed to the community's development. It provides a foundation to identify and evaluate historical resources for their historic significance. Within each development theme, representative property types are identified and their character-defining features are described, along with photos of examples within the community. Because the context statement describes the built environment, it is not intended as a representation of all the people, events, and places that shape the community's history. The context statement also contains a study list of notable properties identified during community research. And that should receive further evaluation in the future to determine any significance. However, a context statement does not result in the historic designation or regulation of properties without separate analysis and a public hearing process. Next slide, please. The 8 development themes from the draft historic context statement are shown on this slide. The study period where historic properties are likely to be found in meaningful number is from 1915 to 1984, when the majority of the community was developed. And it also extends through the 1990s for properties related to immigration and cultural heritage. A historic context statement doesn't cover the history of the recent past, because in order to evaluate whether a property is important and eligible for designation, enough time must have passed to evaluate the property objectively within its historic context. Next slide, please. The community plan update also includes a focused reconnaissance survey. The survey included baseline data from the historic context statement, the previous 1996 Mid-City survey, designated individual resources, subdivision research, and other archival research. It also included high-level field work, which we also call a windshield survey. Its focus is to identify areas of shared development history and then looks at these areas for their potential historic significance. The survey evaluates post-war World War II tracts as master plan communities to determine if they could be eligible as historic districts. If they appear ineligible, they will be proposed for exemption from the further review under the city's potential historical resource review process. This requires review of all properties 45 years old or older. This focus is on post-war master plan communities because their shared history and repeating building styles provides an economy of scale in the evaluation of potential historical significance. The survey, importantly, also looked for potential districts and identified those for further survey. All other areas, including the potential historic districts and large portions of the planning area that have a mixture of property types and a broad range of building ages, would remain subject to the potential historical resource review process. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes some important characteristics of historic districts because, as noted, The survey focus is on identifying areas of shared history, particularly those that appear eligible as historic districts. A historic district is an area with a collective historic significance, whether that is historical, architectural, cultural, or other attributes. The individual properties within a historic district may not be significant in their own right, but taken together, the properties have a collective significance. It's important to note that identification as a potential historic district does not result in regulation. It identifies the need for further evaluation to verify whether a district exists. Historic districts are not regulated unless they are listed on a national, state, or local historic register. Local designation is a public process that requires property owner notice and workshops and Historical Resources Board hearings. The purpose of a historic district is to protect the historic features and elements that tell the story of why a district is significant, not to stop all change within the district. Buildings are evaluated as either contributors or non-contributors to a district's historic significance. New development and uses that comply with zoning are allowed. This can include building alterations and new accessory dwelling units within contributing properties that comply with U.S. Secretary of Interior's design standards. There is greater latitude to permit alteration to the character of non-contributing properties. It is also possible to restore altered historic features and change a non-contributor to a contributor. City planning has also launched the Preservation and Progress Initiative, which is a comprehensive update to the city's heritage preservation program that will streamline processes for new homes and other uses while protecting places of historic, architectural, and cultural importance and facilitate their adaptive reuse. As part of this effort, we will be looking at the development of objective design guidelines that will provide clear standards and requirements for new development within designated historical districts, rather than rely on the latitude within the Secretary of Interior standards. Next slide, please. The second draft of the historic context statement will be posted on the project webpage this Friday, December 13th, and the working group, as well as the broader community, are invited to provide comments. The first draft of the reconnaissance survey will be posted in February of next year for review. You all have perspectives and lived experience in these communities, which is of course valuable to this process. As a next step, and when you review the draft documents, we would welcome comments related to local historical knowledge, such as individual sites that can be evaluated for the study list, a look at the boundaries of the proposed historic districts shown in the survey, and of particular importance, narratives and important sites rounding out the discussion of the community's social and cultural history. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bernie. We'll now pause again for 20 minutes for a working group discussion. Please consider these questions at the top of the slide as a prompt. Do you have any clarifications you would like made or any questions? What sites and resources are important to you? And what's important in social and cultural history of the Mid-City communities that we should be aware of? You're also welcome to just share any thoughts that have come up or anything you'd like to share. So we'll begin with our first working group member with their hand up. Nam Nguyen.
Yes, just a quick question for clarification about the timeline for comments on the draft. So the draft will be released December 13th, and is there a cutoff date for comments from the community on the draft?
Yes, thank you for that comment. We are inviting and asking for comments by February 28th on the draft context statement.
Okay, thank you, February 28th. Just because in the draft historical conditions, Little Saigon is centered around El Cajon and Menlo, but there are other significant, culturally significant sites on University Avenue. And so I want to make sure there's enough time for the Vietnamese community to provide their input on the boundaries of the Little Saigon district as presented in the draft, and if they would like to see that expanded or not.
Thank you. And if I can add, we will also be inviting and looking for those type of comments on the survey document. And as I pointed out, the survey will be out in February, and then there will be time for comments on those probably for a couple months. So let's say through January through March, we will be taking comments on both documents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nam. All right, David Modi.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Talmadge Historical Society and Historic Kensington for completing the work of the 1998 plan, community plan, which identified those parts of those two neighborhoods as potential historic districts. Kudos to them for taking on a volunteer effort rather than waiting entirely for the city to do the work for them. I want to also urge all of the neighborhoods to really look closely at your for what's historic in your community. I think it's really important not to throw away our historic and architectural and cultural heritage with just unthinking redevelopment. There's lots of good things out there that really contribute to creating attractive neighborhoods that you want to live in. I personally find modern architecture often quite sterile and uninviting, and is, of course, one of the reasons why I moved to an older part of the city. And when it comes to housing, only 5% of the housing stock is pre-World War II. So it's not like it's this vast quantity out there that's left to be protected and saved. And I am at a certain point interested in learning more about cultural designation of sites and properties. There are two interesting cultural sites in my neighborhood that I'm interested in, but don't quite know what the parameters for that are. So something to talk about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other working group members have any thoughts they'd like to share? Lisa.
Hi, I'm just curious, after we get the historic report on December 13th, and there's a comment cycle, are we going to review it in our next mid-city plan meeting? Is that on the agenda? Are we going to be able to review the report, or is it only going to be through comments via, I'm assuming, internet, email, etc.?
Yeah, I can answer that, Lisa. So the next meeting, working group meeting, tentatively scheduled for mid to late February. So yeah, that would be the part 2, the historic. So there'll be a discussion on the context statement and the historic survey. So that'll be part of the agenda at that time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Randy, on to you.
Hey everyone, thanks for the presentation and the analysis. This is an important element of the plan. In regards to the social cultural significance question, I really appreciate that question. That's something that I'm interested in elevating. I know PANA, where I work, Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, wants to elevate that as well. Particularly the fact that City Heights is a historic refugee neighborhood, and it's been a resettlement area since the 70s and is a vital part of the identity of Mid-City. And we're interested in having it recognized as such. The areas in Mid-City that are historic refugee areas. The 50th University area in particular, has been home to one of the largest Somali enclaves in the entire country. It was the second largest for many years, and due to rising housing costs, is now the third largest population. Some folks have relocated to Ohio, but it's still the third largest and is an important hub, cultural and economic area for the East African community and Somali community in particular. So some people call it Little Mogadishu, some people call it Little East Africa. But we wanted to elevate the fact that Mid-City the parts of Mid-City are historic refugee areas. So we'd like to have that recognized in the plan.
Thank you, Randy. Any other working group members who would like to share their thoughts? Eric.
I want to briefly echo what Randy said. I really think that local communities such as Little Sudan or Little Mogadishu should be set apart or recognized, right? You know, I think it's really cool that Little Saigon is. I'd like to see some of the other diverse communities within our neighborhoods recognized, because I think that's one of our the hallmarks of our area and one of the strengths. So, yep, just want to echo that.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone else? Randy, I believe you still might have your hand up from before, unless you have something else to add. Okay, you put it down. All right, any other working group members? All right, well, we can move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is public comment. And of course, to our working group members, if we have time after public comment and any further thoughts come up for you, we can turn it back over to you all. So we'll now begin our public comment portion of this evening. You all have been warmed up to the chat. You know it's there. Just wanted to remind you again, feel free to add any comments or edit suggestions you might have for us into the chat, as it will be documented. And then for our public members that would like to voice their feedback verbally, please use the raise hand function and I will grant you access to unmute yourself. We are going to have this limited to 1 minute per person, just so we can make sure we have as much time for anyone who would like to contribute to be able to do so. But we can also, like we've done with the working group meetings, our working group members come back to you a second time if there is time, if you have more than one comment to make. So let's see here in our attendees. I don't see anyone yet with their hand raised. We can also, okay, I see a couple now coming in. All right, so we're gonna begin with Karen. I have asked you to unmute yourself. Hopefully you have the ability to speak.
Hi, I think I've unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you, Karen.
I'm Karen, I live in Talmadge. First of all, I would like to take issue with what Eric said about cars versus transit users. In fact, cars have been prioritized in recent decades and still are. Yes, bus lanes do make it a little bit hard, make it harder for cars. But I mean, one reason the bus lanes are so good is that it speeds up the ride. I sometimes take the express bus on El Cajon from Winona to Balboa Park, and it's much faster taking the express bus and having the bus lanes. Otherwise, you just get caught up in traffic constantly, and you end up spending half a day sitting in the bus. And about historic preservation, I really have mixed feelings about historic preservation. I was an architectural librarian at one point in my life and have had an interest in architecture preservation or historic preservation, but now I feel it's being used to, in fact, freeze things the way they are and to stop high density housing in single family neighborhoods. And I'm really upset about that huge chunk of Talmadge that is, I guess, still seeking historic designation. And by and large, it's a resource that high income, well-educated people can take advantage of, and other people have a really hard time, don't have the time or other resources to do the research necessary. So I really think the city needs to be very careful about designation of historic districts.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Before I move on to the next public speaker, just wanted to make a comment about our chat. There's some options you have in the chat to either chat to everybody or just to chat to the host and the panelists. So if it's a comment that you would like everyone to see, make sure that you use under the to field, choose the drop down and choose everyone or panelists and hosts only, if that's what you wish to do. Because we only have a couple folks with their hands raised, I am going to extend this to 2 minutes per person instead of just the 1 minute. But next up, we have Mary Ann Green. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'm Mary Ann Green here in Normal Heights South. And a shout out to Bernie. I used to work with you a long time ago. I'd like to make sure that the policy of preserving our sidewalk design in Normal Heights is maintained. We have I call it a trolley design, where there are certain lines that have to be encased in the cement. When they pour a new sidewalk, it's charming and nice. And also the blocks of cement that show the stamp of the original contractor has to be preserved. And for our neighborhood, which doesn't have a lot of amenities, this is a nice little amenity to have. It's not really asking a whole lot. We don't have, hardly any historical structures in Southeast Normal Heights. It's mostly it's lots of little bungalows. Not many, significant people didn't settle this area. Meaning historically significant. So we don't really have the opportunity to designate this area, or even a part of it historic. But having these sidewalks has been nice, and I don't know if that's on the chopping block or not. The other thing I would just wanted to quickly mention, and I did say it in the chat, is there are two structures on El Cajon Boulevard and 37th. On the south side, there's a very old house that I've been told is the oldest house in what was East San Diego, the city of East San Diego. It's falling apart. I don't know if it's part of the survey or it's been ruled out. Then on the other side of that street, on the north side, there is a brick facade or facade, however you pronounce that word. Anyway, it's a beautiful, gorgeous brick design, maybe one of the most beautiful in Normal Heights. It was exposed, and was just unwittingly discovered a few years ago. And I wanted to give that a little attention in case that could be targeted for preservation. I'd hate to see that building torn down. If we're going to see a lot of high density new affordable housing on El Cajon, that, I wouldn't want to see that place get hit. And that's really it. The only other thing, if I have even 2 seconds, would say, I don't know if we're talking about historic trees, if that's part of the historical survey, but you know, there are some really big trees around here that have been around for a while. It'd be nice to see some of those designated. I'm not sure if that comes under the parks discussion rather than historical. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time and your great presentations.
Thank you, Marianne. We'll move on to Paul Jameson now. I'm gonna ask you to unmute, Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Karen said earlier about supporting support for alternatives to driving. I've been to a lot of these city presentations, and each time the city presents these goals about providing safe and robust alternatives to driving, and that the state goals are to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And then we kind of just hear from motorists saying they want congestion-free streets and to redesign our roads and make them wider and faster. I drive too, and I don't like sitting in traffic. I can relate to that. But, this is a metro of 3 million people, and a lot of people can't drive also. We heard about the people who can't take transit, but there's a lot of folks who can't drive, right? So we need to provide an option to them too. And to expect that everyone is going to drive and we're not going to have congestion is unrealistic. And so we need to provide options to folks to be able to take transit and have priority over single occupancy vehicles. So I strongly support the bus only lane on El Cajon Boulevard. And, we have this low ridership rate versus driving because you're basically forced to drive in San Diego. And so we should really be working towards providing these better alternatives. And one of those alternatives, again, is ceding some of that public space to other forms of transportation, because we basically said our roads are either for driving or parking our cars on them. And so, of course, most people are going to drive. And I get that not everyone can take transit, not everyone can ride a bike, but let's at least make those options more viable. And I just hope that the focus of these conversations can be more around that. And then finally, on historic districts, I'm okay with declaring individual properties historic. I love historic architecture, but to just take large swaths of neighborhoods and say it's going to make them much harder to build any multifamily housing or additional ADUs is really going in the wrong direction. And this current process of kind of bypassing city processes to get these historic districts in place really should be reformed. And I think we're just going in the wrong direction there. I don't want to see Kensington, where I live, become completely historic district, which is currently a process that's underway. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I do see our staff responding to actually Marianne's comment earlier, so I apologize for moving so quickly to the next speaker for that one. Marianne, it does look like the city has a heritage tree program, and it is with the urban forester in the city's transportation department, but we of course welcome comments like that in these meetings. And then Kelsey also provided a response about the little house on 37th and El Cajon in the chat to everyone in response to Marianne's comment. But thank you, Paul. We'll move on to our next public commenter, Danielle Lemon. You should be able to speak.
Layman.
Layman.
So I was told that unless we actually give public comment, we won't get written comments back. I remember at the very first meeting we had as a working group, I provided 2 pages worth of about 30 comments on different page numbers. And I would just like to read off the page numbers so I can get written comments back. Written comments in the very first working group. This is for the draft existing conditions report, so I'm backtracking a bit. And I'm hopefully getting it done in 2 minutes. 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, 18, 18, 20, 23, 23, 23, 33, 33, 42, 46, 49, 54, 56, 58, 60, 62, 63, 78, 81, 83, 84, 96, 97, 97, and 98. If I could get my written comments on those page numbers back in written form, I would truly appreciate it. Thank you all, city staff.
Thank you, Danielle. Your voice was a bit broken up. Some of us were able to hear some of it. I did hear that you're requesting written feedback to specific questions, and you had a list of page numbers. If you could also just put that in our chat so we have it on the record, that would be fantastic and helpful for us to be able to get back to you. And I do see actually that Alex has responded, and he provided a link to where those responses can be found.
Yes, and just to add context, we've received, I think, over 70 comments related to the edits to the Mid-City Atlas existing conditions report. So this is our draft response, which should include all your comments as well. So hopefully you'll see it there. Thank you.
Thank you. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a comment you would like to make. While we're waiting, Alex does have a list of questions that were placed in the chat that we'll now move on to now that we have time.
Yeah, so there was a question about unpaved alleys. So maybe the mobility staff can talk about that situation, and we actually have a slide on that. So Aparna, can you share the screen on that? This concern came up at the last meeting as well, about all the unpaved alleys and roads. So I think that one is right after the mobility presentation. The other question, there was a question from Daniela. Why isn't there a bus line on College Grove Drive for all the city workers who are not parking outside the operations yard by Choyas Lake? I don't know if this is something we can answer today, but that was another question that we had.
Yeah, maybe Alex, I'll start with the College Grove one while Emmanuel's jumping on for the thanks for bringing up the alleys. And I responded to that too, that we're looking at that, and in fact that's part of the slide in that discovery phase here. But wanted to share on College Grove, we brought up that issue to MTS. So just for clarity, the MTS is the transit service provider for the whole, mid-city area, and then some, right? It's for the majority of the city, even though, we do have some North County Transit District, which is a separate district that comes in via University City and for the coaster service. But primarily, it's MTS that serves the city. And that said, right, their operations are under their control, whether they add service miles, hours, stops, different types of services. Sandet comes in on more of the higher speed, what are called regional services. So we have shared that one, given that would be a local bus need, and there just isn't the demonstrated density in folks to warrant a new local bus service there. So what we've been doing is working with our city staff that are primarily on that street. And I think that was part of the comment, was cars parked there and presence of the city workers. So we're trying to share alternative commute options, that run the gamut from, carpool and other shared mobility and other alternative transportation services. So that's part of what my team does in sustainability and mobility. Just want to share that's a program that we're really emphasizing and expanding. Doesn't apply directly to this one, but recently all the city staff members got free transit passes. So we've seen quite an uptick in those areas that do have transit. Again, this area is a challenge to serve a transit, but just that said, right, we have folks that are really talking across to different departments located within the community like this, and sharing alternative commute options. So with that, I will pass it to Emmanuel to talk through the alley slide.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, as Phil said in his comment, we are still doing additional research on the unimproved alleys. What we've been able to find so far was the inventory from the asset owning department, transportation, the street division. That lays out where the unimproved alleys are based on the kind of surfacing it has. So within Mid-City, there is 97 blocks or smaller segments totaling 7.8 miles of unimproved alleys. 2.1 miles of asphalt concrete unimproved alleys, and 5.7 miles of unsurfaced alleys. We also talked to our maintenance division and street division, and currently their priority is ensuring that these unimproved alleys are passable for vehicle travel, especially after rain events. Currently, that is what the budget allows for now. The cost to actually improve alleys is estimated at $20 million per mile. And the improved and maintenance is roughly on the order of $1 to $2 million $2 million per mile. And again, another thing is the council unimproved alleys is included in Council Policy 200-01, which lays out the roles and responsibilities for street improvements. Adjacent owners to the alley could improve their alleys, and city forces could improve alleys based on budget being available. And that's the research that we've been able to collect so far.
Yeah, maybe Emmanuel, we can add that text that on the slide that you're sharing right now in the chat. That way folks can take a look at that council policy and the pavement management plan report, if you're interested in that topic. And yeah, I think in this, like Emmanuel shared, the discovery phase, we want to include this information and material ultimately with the existing conditions and share, the process to improve alleys. So make sure it's clear that we know that, and then get feedback of if that's, testing that information with all of you and make sure that's accurate.
Great, thank you, Emmanuel and Phil. I want to introduce Kelly Stonko, Deputy Director, who has a few things to share, switching over to historic preservation.
Thanks, Shannon. I just wanted to mention briefly, we've gotten a lot of great feedback and questions from you all tonight, and thank you very much for that. I just wanted to mention in terms of comments and questions related to new development on designated resources and within designated historic districts. Just wanted to assure everyone that we do allow development within historic districts, including ADUs, additional units, and so forth. We understand that that's not terribly well understood in the community, and that the path for how that is accomplished could definitely be clearer for folks. So that's one of the things we're looking at with our Preservation and Progress initiative that Bernie mentioned earlier, where we'll be taking a comprehensive look at our historic preservation program, our heritage preservation program, how things are identified, designated, what the regulations and processes are, and kind of laying out that clear path for how we can balance preservation of our important history and culture and resources with the housing that our communities so desperately need. So I encourage everyone, if you haven't and if you're interested, to head to our website, sandiego.gov/preservation and progress. You can kind of check out what that initiative is about and sign up for email blasts if you're interested in staying up to date on the progress of that initiative. So just wanted to put that out for everyone, and thank you for my few minutes, Shannon. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'll open it up to any members of the public as well as members of the working group to raise their hand. I do see one hand from our working group. Lisa, please go ahead and share your comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what Kelly said is very valid. So I moved to San Diego from Manhattan, where I lived most of my adult life. There are historic districts in Manhattan. We don't call them that, but there are historic districts there, and building has never stopped. So the two don't have anything really to do with each other. You can have a historic district and you can have housing. And if you look at Manhattan, it's a perfect reflection of that. We have historic districts in Upper West Side, West Village, the Theater District, and we have more housing per square foot than any other place on the planet, probably, or definitely the United States. So I think that we need to decouple the thought that historic preservation blocks housing. It's just not a true statement, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Alex, I'll turn it back over to you if there's any more questions from the chat.
No more questions. A lot of comments. There's a comment from Victor about MTS, top 5 transit agencies in the nation to increase ridership. So MTS is doing well. I know our Mid-Coast line is one of the busiest light rail lines actually in the nation. Paul was, mentioning state requires the vehicle mile travel reduction. It's true, there is a state target that we're supposed to meet. So there's that kind of regulatory aspect to reducing car dependency. Delia talked about walkability issues. She moved from Hillcrest to Corridor, and it's just reduced her walking just because of various issues. So she was mentioning that as well. I see, Lisa, do you have your hand up? Do you have another comment?
Yeah, I just had one more thing that I forgot to mention earlier. When we talked about alleys, some of the unpaved alleys are also pitch black. There's no lighting whatsoever. So I'm not sure if that's part of your future state design to think about. If we're going to pave the alley, we also need to light it, because you wouldn't want to go down that alley and hit a human being. I mean, there's some alleys I walk by that I would never walk by at night. They're really dark. It doesn't feel safe.
Yeah, so the street lighting, the dark streets and alleys, those were the comments we've been getting quite a bit from our engagement. We actually have a slide on that. Thank you, Aparna. The next slide, I think, which kind of has a detail on how does just move up to the text, not the map. Yeah, maybe Phil or Emmanuel can just kind of provide context background on how does streetlights, get added and all that.
Yeah, so streetlight spacing and placement is governed by the street design manual, which is currently undergoing an update. So it lays out how streetlights should be spaced, and then it's also reinforced with the Council Policy 200-18. Streetlights are usually installed as part of redevelopment projects. So on their project frontage, they will space streetlights based on the street design manual requirements, as well as when the city does major capital improvement projects. And also there's the undergrounding program. Specifically for alleys, since buildings typically are typically up against the right of way there, I believe we probably need to look into this more, is that the lights would need to be on the buildings themselves. I don't know, Phil, are you aware of the lights?
Yeah, I was just looking at Marianne's question or comment, or question in that regard. Yeah, let us take a look at that. I believe that's part of our development services requirements, but that's a different group than us. But yeah, let us follow up on that one.
David, I see you have a comment to make.
Yeah, I just want to say that street lights are more effective than building lights, even if sometimes the building lights are brighter, because the building lights actually often cast shadows where you're walking, and so you can't actually see the pavement of the sidewalk you're walking on. But that was a very good question that Marianne asked. I have a somewhat different question, more for Alex. When will the final existing conditions report be published? And how much before the workshop at the Planning Commission will that be, published?
The Mid-City Outlets existing conditions report?
Yeah.
So we're still taking comments. We're still receiving comments. We just got an email comment yesterday, and because we had to reschedule the Planning Commission workshop, so this is kind of the last opportunity for folks to provide feedback, and also for the commissioners to provide any feedback. And so we're planning to have a revision by early February, a revised final draft. So public comments are will take them till middle of January. And also David had submitted several letters, and we are working on the response, just finalizing it. So that's coming to you, David.
But that obviously would have been my follow-up question. Thank you.
Yeah, that will be a Christmas present or a holiday present.
Oh, it's a Christmas present for everyone working over the holidays.
Yes, yeah. Some of our staff will be working over the holidays. So
thank you.
Eric, over to you.
Yeah, I just had a question on a graphic that was in Emmanuel's initial presentation. Could you explain what the city mobility loading prioritization is? Listing walking and rolling at the top and then going down to electric vehicles on the bottom. I'm unaware what that means.
I can maybe jump in there, Emmanuel. Yeah, this is a component of the general plan that we added recently. So that's not only are we talking about complete streets and authentic alternatives to driving, we've actually put a loading priority, putting pedestrians at the top and vulnerable road users along with cyclists, then transit, shared vehicles, and then auto users at the bottom. So that's part of meeting our vehicle miles travel goal. That's already been mentioned, I think, tonight. With the existing conditions report, we really just get into each mode and the status. But I think as you start to see draft community plan updates and the analysis and the network development, we'll share more of that. And that is in effect a prioritization. So we call it the modal loading priority. There's a graphic from our general plan that was adopted last summer. It's Blueprint San Diego. I can go ahead and find that graphic and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, what is being loaded? I mean, are we talking?
Yeah,
like
loading
budget.
Trips and people on the street, really. Yeah, so that's
okay.
yeah. Sorry if that's a bit of a mouthful and a bit technical. So yeah, it's really prioritizing modes and putting it into a structure to bring vulnerable road users to the top of that prioritization.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any last thoughts from anyone in this meeting before we conclude? All right. Oh, I see one hand. Thomas.
Yeah, I had one additional question regarding, and I think it probably has to do with the intersections that are being used for the analysis in the mobility assessment. But there were counts for bike AM and PM, and it was interesting that the recently improved like Mead Avenue bikeway, and then I'm thinking specifically at the connection between the mid-city boundary and then to the west across the 805, where you're getting counts for bicycle use. You're losing some of the fidelity of that data if you're not counting cyclists that are commuting on these recently improved elements of the network. If you're only focused on the on the major thoroughfares, Adams and El Cajon Boulevard and University.
That's great feedback. We'll take a look into that. We'll check our count data and check with our consultants, see if there's any other bicycle data that we can include.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. I see Eric, you have your hand up again. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm just curious. One thing I didn't see anything on is parking. So I mean, it doesn't. I mean, most of us are residents. I think parking mostly affects business owners, right? Because I think if there's inadequate parking, then there'll be less people in their restaurants and businesses. So are you involving the local business development districts and the businesses to see, what their thoughts are on parking, whether they feel they have enough, if they need more, or, you know, things like that.
Yeah, we do work with the business districts, especially on El Cajon Boulevard. We also are closely tied with our curb space and parking district team that have the Mid-City Parking District as part of this project as well. Additionally, in the report, there is a parking occupancy study. I can't study in there. It's chapter 5.7, and it goes over the parking occupancy rates for some of the major streets in the report.
Thank you.
Daniel. Thank you, Eric. Well, we do have some concluding slides, so thank you all for this discussion and for your comments. And I'm going to pass it over to Alex to talk about next steps.
Thanks, Shannon. Next. Just wanted to remind everyone recent upcoming public engagement documents. So in September, we released key engagement efforts and workshop appendices summarizing what we heard from the 4 activities, kind of techniques listed here. We will be releasing the full draft engagement summary and the full appendices before end of the year, which will include all the activities. So we've collected over 5,500 comments from 25,000 people of, you know, all backgrounds via 2 online surveys, and we had 83 events and activities that we attended. So that's coming up, and we'll share the findings at the next working group meeting next. And also upcoming reports and studies, as Bernie touched earlier, the historic context statement will be out on Friday. And we'll also send out an e-blast on Friday or next Monday at the latest. And there will be a focused historic reconnaissance survey that will be out in February. So these 2 documents is a guide for evaluating historical resources. And as David asked, the final draft of the Mid-City Atlas existing conditions report. So we're targeting early February to make sure we have the correct baseline information and all of this, and the engagement summary. And this will kind of all tie into the ideas report, which will be the initial kind of framework, vision, and concepts, and additional kind of urban design study and land use components. So that will be kind of the flow and opportunities to provide input throughout these documents. And we've been getting really great feedback, and please keep them coming. Next. Upcoming events, how to stay involved. For those still on this webinar, you can visit the project website, sign up for updates, planmidcity.org. Again, provide public comment to the Mid-City Atlas existing condition report by January 15th, the existing conditions mobility assessment and the historic context statement by end of February would be greatly appreciated. And then there is a planning commission workshop coming up. It's an informational item and just kind of sharing everything we've been sharing with you all, the existing conditions and engagement. They like to participate, you know, throughout the plan update. So this will be the first workshop on January 9th. And you don't need to be there. You don't need to attend, but it's optional. I'm sure some of you will attend. You can provide public comment at that meeting as well. And then the next working group, mid to late February, is what we're planning a back to hybrid meeting. And then we'll discuss engagement summary and the historic context and survey. So that's kind of the game plan for next couple months. Next. Yeah, I just wanted to wish everyone happy holidays. Hope everyone enjoys and has a safe nice time off, and for most of us, and spend time with family. So we really appreciate you all taking the time to attend tonight. And Lisa, when will we have the date for February meeting? Very soon. We'll send the calendar hold before the holiday break. Yeah. So I think that's it. That concludes the webinar today. Thanks for attending. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
I need to stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye.
All right, Shannon, you stop recording. And